to us. It is not authentic, respect until it costs us something. And the funny thing is, people will say, well, I'm going to stand up for myself because I don't want to be a doormat. Has anyone ever heard someone say that? Yeah. Which I think that's really interesting because that's a limited way of thinking about the world. Because what do doormats do? What can you do on a doormat? What are the verbs associated with a doormat? You step on it, right? You walk on it, right? Yeah. But if you look at yourself in terms of not necessarily just being a doormat, but you could also be a bridge, then that changes how you see things. Here's an example. So I live in Mounds View, and I'm running some errands, and so I decided to get some early lunch. And so I go into this bar restaurant, and at the end of the bar is a guy who's all red-faced, slurred speech, and it's 10:30. This guy's a mess at 10:30, right? So a couple of things I know about this guy. One is that he's been here before, and that he obviously knows these people in this place. And so I just make a note of that, and I close my menu and give it to my waitstaff, and the guys move from the end of the bar right next to me. Now, I wrestled in high school, I played football, so I can get down. So I'm not afraid of this drunk guy, but I am concerned because they're pretty unpredictable. And so, I do what we do in Minnesota. We start small talk. We're talking about the weather and so forth and so on. And then he breaks into his thesis for sitting next to me. And he says, I don't like niggers. I did the same thing. That's exactly what I did. I was like, whoo, right? And I'm like, that's one heck of an introduction. And so I take a step back and I tried to change the subject, because that's very uncomfortable. But something in my spirit said, go back to that. So I go back to it and I said, well, sir, when you use that word, what are you talking about? Describe it. And so he goes on, welfare, unemployed, using the system, ghetto, uneducated, all this stuff. And so I asked him, I said, well, sir, do you know any white people who fit that description? And he says, yeah. I said, how about those twins? So we talk more about sports and stuff, and we go on to other stuff. And he turns to me again and he says, you know what? I don't like niggers, but I like you. So now I'm really confused. Now, I am not encouraging you to use that word. I just want to say that, right? This is not licensed to use that word. But so I was really confused, and I said, well, sir, what about me do you like or you appreciate? And he said, you have a good head on your shoulders, you're intelligent, you seem to be going someplace, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, sir, what if all the people who you think look like me, that you've met, all the people that you've met, that you think look like me, were idiots. And everybody else that you don't know, who looks like me, is a lot like me. And he looks at me and he says, I gotta pee. So he gets up and he goes to the restroom, and I'm like, so I'm trying to get my check as quick as I can. I finally get the check, I sign it, I'm on my way out the door, and guess who meets me at the door? It's the same guy, but he looks a little bit different. His hair is combed over to the side, he's got water driplets on his face, and he reaches out to me with a damp napkin and he says, I have chickens. If you ever need fresh eggs, give me a call. So I take the napkin, I go my way, and he goes his way. What did I do for that man? Well, let's back up. What if, would you have understood after him calling me that dirty name, would you have understood if I gave him a piece of my mind? How dare you call me, blah, 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 blah. Right? You would have understood if I had done that. Had I done that, what would have happened for him? I would have validated everything that he thought about people who he thinks look and act like me. Right? I would have been justified in being a doormat. You're not going to walk over me. You're not going to blah, blah, blah. But my choice was to become a bridge. And so in that small little sacrifice of being called that nasty name, I was able to create a place where he could actually move from where he was to another place. Now, will he stop using that word? Probably not. Will he think differently about the people who he's describing when he uses that word? Probably. Right? One of the things that we've been tricked into is to making the assumptions about the things that we do without ever being critically, without being a critical analyzer of the stuff that we're doing. And so what I would encourage us to do is to not necessarily think of ourselves as doormats, but we have opportunities to build bridges and to help people get places. All right? So, cool. I only have a couple more minutes. I need to get to the juicy stuff. Oh. I am a gadget dude. I love gadgets. How much time do I have left? Do I have about half hour, 20 minutes? 25 minutes. All right, we're going to crank this out. Sorry, I got so excited I hit way too many buttons. Any questions thus far while I try to get back to my stuff? Am I going the right direction? Yeah. Any questions so far? Oh, come on. Something I had to say was controversial or that has got you thinking? Yes.
My daughter over here.
Oh, okay.
My daughter has a friend, a little politically correct friend in color. And why do they call each other nigger and we can't use that word?
Yep. Just like you just did?
Yeah. I mean, they were over for dinner one day, and the one boy, I was asking if they wanted seconds or whatever. He says, yeah, give the nigger some more watermelon.
So,
I
here...
looked at him and I said, I asked him why he did this. He didn't give me an answer.
Okay. So, whose house was that?
Mine.
Yeah. Whose house was that? One of the things that, particularly around that word that's really interesting is that, now, are there any people who will consider themselves white? Can you raise your hand? Okay. One of the things that allows stuff like that to happen is this thing called white guilt. And it's so funny because white people feel guilty about something that they didn't do. Which is interesting, right? So, I believe that there are words that people use that are unacceptable in any context, in any situation. And words like that don't get used in my house. They don't get used in my presence. And so one of the things, okay, so here's a story, right? So I'm using that word as an example. I'm at the Mall of America at the Rack. Anyone been to the Rack? Okay, they have like shoe heaven. Just rows and rows of shoes. And so I'm at the Rack, and on another aisle, I hear a group of teenagers, black teenagers, using that word, right? And so I'm a diversity trainer. I'm a person who fights for justice. So I say to myself, if they say it one more time, I have to do something about it. And so what happens when you put your mouth out there? Right? Typically your butt has to follow. So ultimately they said it one more time. Now, I've been a teacher, I've been, all sorts of stuff, so I'm not afraid of kids or confrontation, but again, it's unpredictable. You never know what you're going to run into. So I garner up my dignity and honor for these folks. I walk over there and I approach them and I said, excuse me, can you guys stop using the N-word? Now I said it just like they said it, so they understood what I was talking about. And the teenagers kind of, he looked at me, and one of the taller boys breaks out of the crowd, and he comes face to face with me. And he goes, and I go, and then he goes. So we're doing this like all in a split second. And then he looks at me and he says, "Yes, sir." And then they collapse and go their way, and it's like, I'm like, yeah, all right. Because on the inside, I'm like, wow! So my point being is that part of, particularly as adults, we have to start taking responsibility for our young people because they're waiting on us to say something. That young man actually was trying to bait you into having some kind of meaningful conversation, and it didn't have a chance to happen. And so why do people get to call each other bad things? They don't. Particularly if they're in my atmosphere. I won't let girls refer to each other as the B word because I don't think that is something that is affirming and uplifting. And my rule of thumb in terms of the conversations that my friends and I have, if I can close my eyes, say the word, and see a good picture, then it's a good word. If you can close your eyes and use that word, and you get flowers and daisies and bunnies and all that kind of stuff that come up for you, then it's a good word to use. However, if you get a different image, then you shouldn't do that. So how do you, as a white person, relate to those black kids and educate them about the rules of your house? Is you have to be stern about the rules in your house. That's not the kind of language we use around here. If you want to talk like that, you can talk about like that with other places, but that's not what we do here, because we value diversity and we value it in all sorts of ways, and that includes the music, because the music is one of the gateways to some of this inappropriate, crazy behavior. There was a song that I heard that I liked on the radio. It was by CeeLo. And it was on the radio, forget you, right? That was the song. And then I heard the unedited version. I was like, no! Right? I let that into my brain. So, we have to be critical. And again, understand that the times are different, right? The things that we thought were cool aren't cool today. We have to give some leeway, but we can't have standards for ourselves and for our families and the people around us. And our core values dictate how those things happen and what we allow in our system. All right. I was going to show a video. I don't think I have time for that. So I want to get to the concepts. The video was cute and all that, but the concepts are more important. So in the video that I was going to show, and you can find this on YouTube. It's very easily accessible. John Quinones does this expose on what would you do, and he goes into a Czech bakery in Dallas, Texas, and they have a Muslim woman who is trying to buy some apple strudel, and they have a gentleman who is the manager of the store who denies her apple strudel. And so what they find is that there are 6 people who are negative towards this woman, who do not want her to get apple strudel. There are 13 people who go to her aid or to try to help her get apple strudel. And then there are 22 people who don't do anything. All right? And so I want to talk a little bit about the negative 6s. Because I think you might have at least one negative 6 in your family or in your life. There's someone who's not politically correct or doesn't know how to say the right things or is oftentimes socially awkward and that kind of stuff. And typically, what do we say about those people? Or what kind of labels do we give them? That they're narrow-minded. What else? That they're intolerant. That they're bigots. What's that? That they're racist. Right? So we say those things about them, and once we say that about them, do they go, thank you? Do they get all warm and fuzzy inside and say, now I can help you with your blah, 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 blah? Is that what happens? No. What happens? They get mad. They get defensive. Do they come and hang around you? No. Right? Do you want them hanging around you? No. right? And so typically what happens is that the negative sixes get disconnected from the rest of our human family. And to be quite honest, should a Muslim woman be able to have access to apple strudel? Oh yeah, they should, right? I mean, everybody needs a good strudel. Now, if it was broom caca, that's something different, or lutefisk. And so the negative sixes are disconnected, and that the negative six behavior is a learned behavior, right? And in the clip, and you'll get a chance to see that if you're interested on YouTube, what you notice is that a lot of the older folks in this video are these negative sixes. They're kind of set in their ways. And what do we know about human behavior? Why did the baby fall down? Because it worked. And it worked in the past, which means that it should work, and it will probably work in the future. And so these negative sixes have learned this pattern of behavior, that the behavior that they've exhibited has worked in the past, which means that it should work now, and it will work in the future. So when will the negative sixes change their behavior? Come on. We said people can learn, change, and grow. So when will they change their behavior? When they see that it's not working. Because we can tell them, but until they have that epiphany, it won't happen. All right. The positive 13s are very interesting because they are courageous, they're connected, and they find allies. All right. What is the precursor to courage? What must one have prior to courage occurring? You must have fear, right? Anyone served in our armed services at all? Please raise your hand. Anyone? Okay, cool. One of the things that I appreciate those folks who serve because they get a lot of training around fear. One of the things that makes servicemen and women capable of having fear and overcoming their fear is that they've practiced enough to expect what to do in times of emergencies, right? They work as a group. They have allies that help them to carry out their missions. They get exposure to fear. And what is fear? What is fear? It's the unknown. All right? There are two pieces of fear that we have to analyze and talk about. There is the ambiguity of knowing about what the future. So that emotional ambiguity creates that fear of the unknown. Right? But there is also fear in terms of respect. For example, I will not jump out in the middle of this river because I respect the river. I fear the river, right? I know that it is greater than me, and it can consume me, so I must have a level of fear or reverence for the river. And a lot of times, I'll hear kids say this in particular. They'll say, well, I don't have no fear. I'm not afraid of anybody. You're psychotic. If you don't have fear, I have fear for you because you'll do anything, right? And so the positive 13s are courageous. They understand their connections to other people, and they find allies to make sure that they're able to do something. The 22s are fearful, and typically what are their fears? Why would 22 people not act when 13 would and 6 are negative? Why would the 22 not act? To avoid conflict. What else? Past experiences. What else? It's easier not to get involved. One of the things that I will give you is, I'm sure you have been in a situation and you've seen something that was outside of your core values, that was obtuse and grotesque, and you stood there in awe, and you went, or you didn't say anything, you just were like, Has anyone had a situation like that? Yeah. Do you know why deer stop when they see headlights? They're startled. They're surprised. They're shocked. And so instead of doing something, they do nothing. Now, I want to do some training with deer so that when they see headlights, they're not so surprised. Part of the reason that we don't act and we become 22s is that we haven't mentally practiced what-if situations. When they do drill, they're always, okay, so what if this happens? All right, we're going to do this. And what if this happens? We're going to do this. They have a manual for everything. They have a manual for what the degree of angle is for your sheets as you tuck them in. I mean, everything is just like written down, and they have every situation under control, which surprises me when we have, Katrina. But anyway, so the 22 get caught up in this fear because they haven't practiced that. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do is to have these what-if conversations with your families and friends so you know what might happen. Here's an example. Women. Have you had conversations with other women about sexism? It didn't have to be long conversations, but have you had conversations with women about sexism? Yes. And its impact and all this kind of stuff. All right? I see a lot of yeses and nods of heads. All right? I'm going to ask a really weird question, guys. How often have you and other guys had a conversation about sexism? Doesn't come up often in my conversations either, right? So if we're looking at trying to solve a problem, and half the problem is talking about it, but the other half isn't, it's going to be pretty tough to get rid of, huh? And so what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask, men to talk with men about how to be more effective in their relationships with women. And I'm going to ask women to sit with other women to talk about how they can better relationships with men. All right? But I want to go back to this -6 because this is probably the most important point that I want to bring in the short time that I have. Please raise your hand if you are a good person. However you define that, raise your hand if you are a good person and raise it high. All right, great. So you are good people. One of the things that I was watching Animal Planet. Anybody watch that? Shark Week is coming up in October. I should know. So I'm watching Animal Planet, and they're following this pack of wolves, this coven of wolves, and they show them as little puppies, and they're playing and tussling, so cute and stuff. And then they show them as teen wolves, and they're practicing, and they're roughing around with each other and tussling, and then they finally show them as adult wolves. Now, I'm not sure, this is like, they must grow fast because this is an only 22-minute program. But, and I don't know why they're endangered if they grow that fast, But anyway, so they follow these wolves and they're on their final hunt, right? So, I know we got 10 minutes left in the program, it's the final hunt and all this kind of stuff. And so they show the wolves and their strategy, and one wolf is supposed to jump up on the hind quarter of this elk. And so, everybody's executing their moves, and the wolf does his thing. He's like, yeah, I've been practicing this all my life. So he jumps up and he goes on the back end of the elk. And what does the elk do? He kicks him. Now, there are no ERs in the forest. When the elk kicks the wolf, what happens to the wolf? He breaks his hip. What's the wolf's new destiny now that his hip is broken? Death. And so wolves know what we all know is that the pack is only as strong as the weakest wolf, right? And so he makes a decision to do what with the pack? Does he stay with the pack or does he decide to leave? He decides to leave the pack. And he leaves because he knows it's better for the pack that he goes off and dies alone. All right? Human beings beings are much like those packs of wolves. And one of the things that we do is when we have a person or a wolf that is divergent from the majority of our culture, what we will say to that wolf is, we are too good, so we must separate ourselves from you. And because we're so much more social than wolves, is that when we cut off one of those deviant wolves, or one of those racist wolves, or bigoted wolves, or sexist wolves, instead of just going off to die, what do? They go and find another pack. And once they join that pack, they find a pack that is just as sick and is evil as they are, and then that pack starts breeding. So not only do we have a pack of sick wolves, but this pack of sick wolves is now breeding more sick wolves. And so I never if you raise your hand and say that you were a good person. Because one of the things I want to caution you is those family members or those co-workers that we say are those bigots or they're disconnected, that we have to keep them close to us because we're good people. My final story, in high school, the kitchen is where everything happened. And so we do our homework there. My mother would cook there. We had a TV and an ironing board in the kitchen, and we just hung out in the kitchen. That's where you did your homework, everything in the kitchen. And this particular night, I had a habit of laying my clothes out on the ironing board so that I could, having creases was extremely important when I was in high school. Right? And my creases were so tight that I could actually cut people with my crease. So having creases were important, and we were big ballers back then. So we had penny loafers that we would put quarters in. That's how, we were really balling in the big 80s. And so I leave my clothes in the kitchen for the next day. And Thursday night, my mom cooked catfish, and it was delicious. Oh, it was just absolutely delicious. Especially if you put enough red hot sauce on anything, it is delicious, right? So I drowned it in hot sauce, and we had that for dinner and had a great time. But Friday morning, first hour algebra class, I had a problem. I hate Facebook because they keep reminding me of this problem. What was my problem in first hour algebra class, having left my clothes in the kitchen on the ironing board the night before? I smelled like catfish. And Dolion and Dexter have not let me live this down to this day. They're like, bro, stir hot. That was like a late night dive where you get chicken and stuff. And so they called me like Chicken Boy, And so I'm still living that down. But why did my clothes smell like chicken? I mean, like fish, catfish. They absorb the odor from the environment. All right. Now, I also had clothes that were in my closet in my bedroom that did not smell like catfish. Why? All right. They were isolated from that particular environment, and there was a close proximity to the ironing board in the kitchen, comparably to my clothes in my bedroom. All right. So my clothes smelled like catfish because they were close to the catfish. Is that? Okay, cool. So I want to ask you a question. You said you were good people. What do the people around you smell like? Now, I know that's a goofy question, and I want you to explore that goofiness. But I want you to think about that critically. The goodness that you have, is it rubbing off on the people around you? Because it's a rhetorical question, and I want you to think about it yourself, but it begs the question. How do I know a fruit tree? By its fruits. I see orange on an orange tree, I know it's a orange tree. I see apples on a tree, I know it's a apple tree. If you're not bearing fruit, then you're not a fruit tree. my last point. What would happen if I took oranges from an orange tree and I created orange juice and I specifically and exclusively fed it back to the orange tree? What would happen? It would say an orange tree. You said it would die. Why would it die? What's that? It becomes caustic. What else? I took oranges and exclusively gave it back to the orange tree. Nothing else.